Before you get into that, how long
Yes.
how long had you been chasing this deputy before she finally pulled over and stopped? How long are we
She
talking
ran about 3 or 4 miles. So
about?
it was,
there's no at that point.
oh no. Yeah.
You're lit up. You got sirens
Yep.
going.
Yeah. She even goes over a 4-lane divided highway, and like blows it. And
Wow.
so, yeah, it was really crazy. And she's telling me she's going to some call. So my partner, Brian Jenkins, shows up now. And I'm glad Brian shows up because he was a Guthrie, Oklahoma police officer before he was a trooper. So this is, he's like, oh, and he knows this old gal. He goes, let me go up there and talk to her. And so Brian goes up there and talks to her. He comes back to me. He goes, dude, she's lost her mind. I don't know what's wrong with her. And so at this point, she's on her cell phone, bag phone, I remember, making some calls. Now, I don't have their radio frequency, so I'm not hearing what's going on the radio traffic in the background, but everybody else does. And she's telling people that I have a gun to her back or had a gun to her back and is keeping her from going to a call. And Sheriff Johnson gets on the radio and says, I want that trooper arrested. I want to set up a roadblock and do not let him leave there. I didn't know this was happening. I'm just kind of hanging out, waiting on my supervisor. And this is going down, and people start showing up that I didn't even know were working. And to
know why people are showing up? They want to see the shit show in progress. They go, get me some popcorn, fellas.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So there's 5 or 6 troopers showing up. I'm like, man, he goes, so what happened? I'm just like, dude, I trying to stop this old gal. She said she's a deputy and I didn't know really what to do. I called my supervisor. And so by now there's 2 members of our TAC team that overheard it, and they're coming because they're like, the way this sheriff is talking on the radio, like, he's going to arrest his trooper, and these guys are like, nah, that ain't happening.
And did you know this sheriff before?
No, never heard of him. No, he'd been there for a long time and never met him. And so by the time he gets there, there's about 9 troopers there and about 9 deputies.
Holy
roughly.
cow.
And everybody's just kind of standing around. Nobody's really doing anything. And of course, I don't know what's normal and what's not. I mean, I'm just kind of taking this in, and I'm leaning against the car, and Sheriff Johnson shows up, and this is classic. And I'll tell you what, people got their own versions of this, but it's pretty accurate. He shows up, and he's saying this is a conspiracy dating back many, many years. You guys have always been against us, talking about the highway patrol. And he goes, where's that trooper at? And I asked Brian, I'm like, is he like, think he's going to put me in jail or something? What's he want me for? And he goes, dude, just don't say nothing, and everything's going to be fine. So he's like, was it you? And he's pointing at all these different troopers. Was it you? Was it you? Where's that trooper at? And I made up my mind. I said, this guy's really emotional. He's really mad. I'm thinking, if this joker thinks he's going to put his hands on me, I'm going to knock his teeth out.
There you go.
And he comes up to me, and instead of saying, is it you? He just kind of looked at me, and I looked at him, and then he goes, well, by golly, this is a conspiracy. And he just walked away because I was the only one left.
So, Branson, give everybody, you played defensive tactical. Give everybody an idea. How tall are you? How much were you weighing at that point?
Well, at that time, I was 6'4", about 255,
So, and the sheriff was like, what, 5'9", 160?
Oh, no, he was your regular Buford Pusser, top guy. He was a big old fat guy, but Wayne can tell this story a little better, that he's got a son that showed up in the war wagon. It was like some camouflaged old military surplus wagon, Junior or whatever his name was. And they showed up. But the best part of this whole deal, I kid you not, I couldn't believe it when it happened. There's a retired trooper. I can say Ron Hamilton was his name. I'll never forget this. You remember those old Mini 14s?
Yeah, the Ruger Mini 14.
Yeah, man, he's standing there kind of to the side of everybody, and he's just kind of holding this Mini 14. He hadn't said nothing to nobody. And Sheriff Johnson, and this is the center point, he says, well, by God, somebody's going to jail tonight. And I kid you not, Ron Hamilton racked around in that Mini 14. You know how loud that is. He says, well, I don't think so, boys. All you deputies need to kind of move over there on that side if we're going to go down that road. And he starts moving deputies over on the other side of the road and kind of like, this is the line you're not going to cross. And I couldn't believe it. It happened, and so it kind of dissipated. By then, the old gray-haired lieutenants are showing up, and they're having off the county road conversations, and everything kind of piped down. And he just come up to me, my supervisor, Jerry Lawson. He's like, and I'd do this if he was standing right here. He stuttered. He said, Branson, what the hell happened? And I told him what happened. He says, and he's not going to listen to this. I doubt he's got an Apple phone, but he said, just write down what happened, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. So I wrote what happened, and well, sure enough, in the weeks and months to come, they end up indicting or forming a grand jury on Sheriff Johnson on some other matters, and end up calling me as a witness on that specific thing, just kind of talk about how crazy he was. But yeah, it was nuts.
What eventually happened with the deputy?
You know what? Great. I'm glad you asked. So I never, her name was Janella Spurlock, and she was actually going to a death notification of a suicide or something. She wasn't doing anything of emergency nature, but here's how this is what life will give you every now and again. You grow up and you have this is why you always got to treat people the best you can, because I'm coaching, let's say 15 years later, I'm coaching a little league baseball team, and the grandma of one of the kids I'm coaching is Janella Spurlock.
No kidding.
No kidding. You can't make this stuff up. And so I'm just, I don't talk to her. I don't dislike her or anything. She lied on me. She said some bad things about me, but whatever. I look over there one day, and her and my mom are chummed up in the bleachers. Next thing I know, we're going to dinner together with her.
Oh my God.
And so, you know what? I just, one day after dinner, I'm like, hey, it's good seeing you. Gave her a hug, and shoot, I see her all the time. She's crazy, but I love crazy. So, but that's why you never know what's going to happen. So
I got to tell you, I have never heard of a standoff between the patrol and the sheriff's office.
That's a first. Yeah. That's a first.
It's a real deal, and I'm telling you, when that 223 round when it went in the hole of that Ruger, buddy, things got serious.
It's like racking a shotgun. That gets everybody's attention.
I'm telling you.
Well, yeah. Speaking of racking a shotgun, I got a quick divergence. So when I was a rookie, talk about rookies. One of my first nights out on my own, we got a burglary call at the Dillon's food store on East Iron in Salina, Kansas, and I'm going, oh great! I think I get to go in. And he said, no, you get to stay outside. So me and another guy, we're staying outside. Two veteran officers go in. One's got a shotgun, and they're going through, and about 4 or 5 minutes later, we hear kaboom, and I start to get shots fired. No, he goes, no. It's 10-4. It's 10-4. Come out. And this veteran officer's got this look on his face. Well, what happened? There's one other sound in those old grocery stores that sound like somebody racking a shotgun, and that's the ice maker dumping ice. He heard that ice maker dumping ice, thought somebody's racking a shotgun. He turned around and blew up the ice maker.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Now I got to tell one story, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's a dear friend of mine, but this was back in the 1970s, and we out on patrol and went up to check the country club, the local country club there at nighttime, and sure enough, there's a window broken out, and you don't know where they are inside this whole massive building. And so we called back up in, and my buddy comes up. He was a sergeant at the time, and a couple guys climbed through the window, and we were doing the outside perimeter. So when they bucked, when they blew out through the door, we'll be able to run them down. Well, sure enough, the guy comes, the crook comes out and hits that screen door, and it goes back and hits the side of the wall, makes a loud sound, takes off running across the golf course, and you hear, kaboom, halt. Stop, police. Like, didn't you get that a little bit backwards?
Yeah, a little backwards.
It's West Virginia. Everything's backwards.
Everything's acceptable there, brother.
Well, so how did you? So you said you testified in a grand jury. So what they end up doing with Sheriff Pusser?
Man, he ended up resigning.
What kind of stuff did they have on him?
Man, it was a lot of misappropriation of tax dollars, a bunch of craziness that I wasn't even a cop when he was doing it. And, they put a grand jury together I think just to get rid of him, but they got a great sheriff there now in Rogers County. So, yeah.
So no more conspiracies, no more
No. That was a blip on the map. I'll tell you, my wife still has the newspaper. It made the front page of Tulsa World, and it hung. Oh, you're that guy? I'm like, really and truly, it was.
Steve, we got to encapsulate this. This is a contender for story of the year, and you can't make this shit up.
So. Oh yeah, I love it.
I tell you, and each trooper has their own little. We were doing this, and we heard on the county radio this traffic. We're like, oh no, this ain't happening tonight. We're
at the end. So at the end of it, I mean the lines have been drawn.
Yeah,
and you got deputies on one side, troops on the other. Who called it?
Man, I think most Southern supervisor did. He's like, just everybody kind of agreed to, he took old Buck Johnson aside and started talking to him and settled him down, and everybody just kind of went their own way. I mean, I don't think that would ever happen again. It was like the perfect storm, And
at the end of the day, there's no excuse. I mean, even if you're a cop or whatever, you're going to do that. Number one, you don't got to be driving like that. Number two, at a minimum, it's reckless driving in addition to felony.
Yeah.
Would that? I don't know. Did you guys have felony fleeing and eluding in that day?
Not then. We didn't. We do now, but then we did not. I mean, you just got kind of tuned up, and that was your felony, for running from the police.
Out of respect, you stopped for each other.
Yeah, and that was that was our own personal vehicle. I mean, it was crazy. So
that's the other thing. Personal. Well. And just when you thought you couldn't top it, right? So just hey, but let's get into some of your interdiction work, because there's a story we're going to talk about related to your interdiction work. But as we know too, people have confused interdiction because they confuse profiling with the big capital P versus profiling with the small p.
Right.
And I remember we started our first, I was actually one of the original 4 members of the Highway Patrol's interdiction unit. We started doing that back in like 86, 87. Actually, Murph, DEA came out, a guy named Barry
Washington.
Oliver. He was out of the DEA office in Wichita.
Oh okay.
Troy Derby. Trying to think of some other guys. Anyway, but they came out. We started working on this. That's where we started learning about Epic, started getting, access to that.
You work with Kurt Simone?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't work with him. He was in a different area. But yeah, Kurt ended up, he was one of the top guys in Kansas and actually ended up running the unit up there. I'll tell you, I think it was him. This is how screwed up even the drug traffickers are. But they had taken off a semi, had a bunch of dope in it. And they actually did a controlled delivery. They brought out, I think it was a Star Lifter or something, but DEA brought it out. They loaded it up on that, doing a controlled delivery. Well, these bad guys thought the dope was in the like the Highway Patrol headquarters, our little Department of Transportation block buildings with really no security on them. So they show up one morning and the building is torn apart. They think that they were storing 300 kilos of dope, in a stone building. Yeah,
in a storage unit. It's crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, I digress. So, but let's talk about that, because there's, I remember too, there's a guy named Jeff Faison, I think out of Florida, was one of the top people, one of the early people. He was doing a lot of stuff on I-4, I think it was. I mean, they were just left and right, just arresting people. And as we know too, you and I were talking when you had to go poop and you couldn't do the episode. So, but we were talking about Operation Pipeline and Highway 54, a huge traffic. Yeah. People don't realize in the Midwest, there's these huge corridors. I'm kind of setting the stage because you've got actually US 81 is the only north-south unbroken highway in the United States. Goes from the Mexican border to the Canadian border, runs right up through our area. You got 54, you've got interstates. And then at one time, actually, Steve, I don't know if we talked about this. I was working one night. One of our guys was further east and he got called to it, I had to stay in my area. But DEA was tracking a plane with the King Air flying in, landed in a little county called Gray County. Why? Because during World War II, the Army Air Corps built a lot of these airfields, and they would come in and land. Well, they had sensors set up. So long story short, that's when my mind started expanding. It's like, man, there's a lot of shit going on. So let's talk about that. There's a lot of shit going on, and your guys are starting to do interdiction. When did OHP, Oklahoma Highway Patrol, we say OHP for those of us inside baseball, those of us in the know, when did the patrol start getting serious about doing interdiction, and what kind of precipitated that? What was going on? Was it, you said before 9/11 you were starting to do this, but what changed?
So you just had some men that just stepped up and really went against the culture of the highway patrol as far as what their daily duties were, and
which was writing tickets and truck inspections,
drunks, and all that. And so there's
changing
a guy named
changing tires,
all that good stuff
for them damn DEA agents who run out of gas and needed somebody to help.
Right.
So there's one in particular. Again, I mentioned him earlier, Mike Plunkett, and then Barry Ross, Jim McBride, Jim Seiler. These guys were kind of around the Oklahoma City metro area and a little bit on the outside, and they would probably just more so their natural abilities to talk to people, probably is what profited them. They weren't receiving a whole lot of training, back in the early 90s, and just making those contacts out on the interstate system, and don't kid yourself, money's what drives things, and when they started getting the attention of the administration, when they started, seizing large amounts of cocaine and large amounts of money, and they're like, well, this can be an organized deal. A guy named Gary Hornback was integral to it as well. And I was watching this happen, and my what drew me to it is, do you remember those old teletypes that would come out over the pipeline seizures
Operation
around the
Pipeline,
country?
and status reports and updates. Yeah.
So what I did was I'd go to headquarters at the beginning of my shift, and they'd print those things off and put them on a clipboard. So I started taking them home because I was the only one who was looking at them, and I'd highlight kind of the guys' names. And that's how I learned about the Robbie Bishops, and I'll close talking about him, of Georgia, the Tim Caldwell of North Carolina, Joe David of California. I mean, all these guys around the country, like, hitting these big loads. I'm like, man, I want to learn how to do that, And so I started signing up for it's just whatever class I could sign up for, just so I could go jump in the car seat, the passenger seat with Mike Plunkett, and learn there in Oklahoma City metro area about drug smugglers.
Wasn't it amazing back in the day is that if you really wanted to do something like, say, go against the culture, it usually had to come out of your pocket, and you had to do it on your own time. I remember doing that with search and seizure training. I mean, learning the law, interview. I mean, we ended up doing this stuff on our own time.
Yes, no, 100%. I'll tell you what, the very first time that I rode with Mike, Mike's a little bitty guy, real unassuming. I mean, and I'll tell you what, he's just phenomenal interdictor. But I remember riding with him, and I-35, center of Oklahoma City, all these cars going by, and he pulls out, and I'm like, what'd you pull out on? He goes, I don't really know yet, but hold on a minute, and then he ends up finding the vehicle. Looks for some body language and this and that. And I'll never forget the very first car we stopped. I got out, and mind you, this is in 1997. I've only been a trooper about a year or two, a year and a half, 2 years. And so he walks up to this Cadillac and to the driver's window, and he looks back at me, and he's grinning. I'm like, that was quick, Next thing I know, this fella's coming out of this Cadillac, and he's got like polio, and he's got these crutches that you hold with your hands, and his legs are all bent up, and he's holding a urine bag in one hand, and he's walking him back to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to jail.
He's
what are
going
we
to have
doing?
you change his colostomy bag,
Yeah,
isn't he?
exactly. Yeah, that hasn't happened yet. But I'm like, what in the world is going on here? He says, Branson is, and he kind of leaned him up against his push bars. I'm like, what are we doing here? I don't understand. I'm going to be fired, and of course I'm leaving
Don't you
out a lot of.
understand? I've already had a standoff with the sheriff's office. I don't need this shit.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm leaving out some stuff, some time. He talked to him, but anyway, I'm kind of speeding forward, and he pulled him out, and he gets his dog out, runs around the car. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting fired. There's no reason why we ought to be searching handicapped people, and is what I'm thinking. Man, he pops the trunk, and there is a backseat compartment in this Cadillac, had $178,000 in it. I'm like, are you kidding me right now?
Now, was the dog trained to also hit on cash or just drugs?
No, just drugs. Yeah. So that was, and then many interdictions came from that. And,
well, hold on. Let's not bypass that one too much yet.
Yeah.
Walk us through a little bit. What was it about it that he saw, that he told you about to train you? What was it he saw that said, hey, there's something here?
So the very first thing that the guy told him when he walked up, he's like, sir, this is Trooper Plunkett. This is why I'm stopping you. And he had his, and I didn't really understand this at the time, but as I matured, I kind of understood more about people and what they do to evade, the truth and whatnot. But he had this urine bag sitting on his leg out in the open. He's like, where are you headed? He goes, well, I'm looking for a bathroom. Is what he told Mike. He goes, Mike says, well, go. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, go. And, well, yeah, I'm just looking for a place to stop, And so he said, nervousness, anxiety was really, really, apparent at the onset of the stop very early. He goes, but normal people that have a urine bag or whatnot are not going to show it, openly show it and lay it out to a police officer or a stranger, and that kind of started his suspicion towards this fella. And it turns out he was a career smuggler, and using his disability as most police officers, 99% of them, they're not going to spend time with somebody that's got that.
Funny you mentioned that, because this goes back to, we do a Patreon side too, our premium side, and we actually had a question, Murphy, member from Michelle Kidd Tackerberry, talking about one of the guys was talking about a story about body-worn camera, but seeing two guys stop. They were dressed like salespeople, but they had a load of dope in there. And they said, do they do stuff to try and throw you off or disguise their intentions? We say, absolutely, all the time.
Yeah.
This is a perfect example of it. I mean, they will even rent single guys that are smuggling will rent a mother and two kids to make it look like we're the happy family going to Disney or Wally World, which, by the way, just so you know, it's closed. Park out front's closed. Booth out front should have told you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I've run into those things, and that is, definitely run into all what you just said. And especially after 9/11, it was insane, the different types of things that we would run into that would try to,
He also talked to us about too, because people won't believe this. It's like when I got consent to search, people say, do they really give you consent to search? And it's like, yes, they do. And one trick I learned, I quit saying, because people instinctively want to say no. Like if you're out trying to look at a car or whatever, people want to say no, so I used to say, certainly you don't have any objection to the war on drugs, do you? Certainly you don't have any objection to us doing our job. Well, would you have any objection if I searched your car for guns, drugs, or large amounts of cash? So I would always try to turn a yes, no into a yes. But in your experience, I mean, how many on a regular basis, how many people gave you consent?
I would say probably 90% of the people that I dealt with gave me consent. And I think it was more specific towards me. One of my strong points is talking with people, and
apparently not after the deputy story.
I had to learn. This was a lesson.
Okay.
You had to learn. But I've had defense attorneys tell me, one guy in particular in federal court, before our suppression hearing, he's like, Branson, I don't know why. I asked the guy, why'd you give him consent? He goes, he was so nice, I had to, and I mean, and really, as I matured and learned how to talk with people and was not, I kind of put the hat in the trunk, and just, I had, I remember being in court and they're like, how tall are you, trooper? How much do you weigh? You were imposing threat.
You were intimidating my client. You threatened them with your physical. And if you put the hat on, the campaign hat, it makes you about 3 to 4 inches taller.
So I kind of had to undo all that. And I I really found that, you really do get more and it's a lot of it is, once you learn, this is what I teach guys, and this is a really good principle, that it's not that you get really good at finding bad guys, but you get really good at knowing what the innocent motoring public is like. And when you know what's normal, and when you know what innocent people, how they react to law enforcement and how they interact, regardless of their race or their culture, there is a consistency with that. And then when you run into a criminal, then you're going to have, it's going to be very apparent that this guy is a bad guy, and spend a little bit more
very
time.
Different.
Yeah. So that's kind of.
Do you remember that video? You can find it on YouTube, but it was a Texas DPS trooper, kind of a big guy like you. And he's talking to this guy and he's saying, now, son, you happen to have anything like this? And this, you can see this guy get nervous, and all of a sudden the guy just vapor locks and he falls into the ditch. Down. He's going to go, I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. Yep. I have. But,
well, let's talk about, let's set the stage now, because based on this, you had the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, come after you.
They sure did.
On one of these cases. So let's talk about that case and walk us through it. What happened? What was going on? And take us through it.
Yeah. So me and my partner were working on I-40 out in eastern Oklahoma. And really and truly, when you talk about this stop, it's like any other stop. As far as like one that we would spend a little time with, and I started a guy's name's Rosano Gerald was his name. I'll never forget his name because he took up about 3 years of my life. But he had his 12-year-old son in the car with him.
What was the reason for the stop?
He didn't use a signal when he's changing his lanes from one side to the other in traffic there and on I-40. And I bring him back, and of course, going through some different questioning, explain to him, write him a warning and everything. And just very high anxiety, nervousness and whatnot. He kind of told me he had kind of blaming his nervousness and anxiety on like a mental, medicated situation that he had, and kind of give me a silly story about what he was doing, and the fact he was in the Army, and anyway, I ended up spending some time with him. I had my partner come up. He ran his dog had alerted to the car, and we searched the car, and I think we were on the road. We were on the shoulder total from beginning to end, probably an hour and 20 minutes after we had searched the car and put everything back, and nothing really exciting happened. He didn't really give us a hard time.
But you say the dog did alert though, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of what kept us hooked up, kind of searching the vehicle. There was an aftermarket alteration of the floorboard that we spent some time in that was empty. There wasn't anything under it. There was some sheet metal that had been put up in the floorboard that was like.
So you obviously, but the point is the dog alerted on something. It had actually been transporting something. You found a concealment that is not a normal.
Right.
That's indicative of smuggling.
Yes. Yeah. So we, everything that we did, we were hitting the numbers, just, we weren't just fishing. Everything, that's not everything we did for a reason. And we didn't keep him any longer than we needed to, and didn't find anything and let him go. And a few months later, the department gets a deal from like a judge advocate's office at the Army that this guy is filing a civil tort claim against me and the Highway Patrol, and
why is he going through the JAG office?
I don't know. It was really strange the way he did that.
They wouldn't have any authority.
No, but it was a big long letter, and it was from them that I profiled him. And if you go back, and this was in 1998, if you go back and look at the kind of what was popular, Pennsylvania State Police, New Jersey State Police, Illinois State Police, all these, ACLU was really, really deep into all those departments for racial profiling and everything. this thing took on a life of its own. They contacted Mr. Gerald. I find all this stuff out, after the fact, but they contacted him, solicited him, represented him, and he had made some claims on that traffic stop that was just flat out lies that we had scared his kid with our dog and turned the heat on.
Were you guys equipped with anything like in-car camera?
Yeah, we were. We were at the kind of the infant stage of it. They were like handy cams, kind of mounted. My tape ran out. My partners luckily did not, so we had his.
And were you mic'd up too? Could they hear what you were saying?
When it was on, yes. And so this deal took on a life of its own, man, and they end up filing a lawsuit against the department and me, and of course their main goal was to get
some kind of a summary
judgment and
get some quick money and be out of there.
Quick money, and then also they wanted us to report our
statistics,
your statistics to them from there on out. So the one thing that there's two guys, my troop commander, Jim McBride, he was a great interdictor, but his leadership, and what he had started doing a year prior was he kept all of our written warnings. Everything was written in, right? And he had kept all of that. So we already had a statistical breakdown of the vehicles that we were stopping, the race and everything of people. And so we had that up front and kind of showed, them that what we already had. Well, then they started soliciting people that I had stopped, which ended up kind of backfiring on them, and they'd send them letters, and then those people would send the highway patrol letter saying, "Hey, I didn't appreciate ACLU calling me. This guy searched my car, but man, he sure treated me good, and I don't have no problem with him." And that kind of backfired on him. But this deal lasted about 3 years. Bob Ricks was our commissioner at the time, and if you remember, Bob Ricks was over the Waco deal with FBI. And I tell you what, that man, I'll never forget him calling me at my house. And it was a pretty stressful thing for me. And he's like, "Hey, I read the internal affairs report and I wanted to talk to you. Is there anything else that happened maybe you didn't talk about?" I said, "No, sir." He goes, "Well, I just want you to know, I've got your back and you're going to get through this thing, but it's going to be a while." So, and I tell you what, that meant a lot. And I tell you what he did. Matter of fact, the DIAP conference in St. Louis, I think it was in 99.
What was the kind of conference was it?
The DIAP conference. It was the large interdiction yearly conference that happens every year that DIAP sponsors. He was one of the speakers, and he talked about that. That's the whole racial profiling thing, and he really supported me. But we ended up getting through that about 3 years later.
But let's not fast forward to the end too much. Yep. Let's kind of talk about what's going on. Real quick, too, let's talk about the structure. You said he's the commissioner. So how is the Oklahoma Highway Patrol structured? Because, for example, in Kansas, the governor appoints the colonel. They're trying to change that to they report to the AG, but there's no Department of Public Safety. What's it structured like in Oklahoma?
So in Oklahoma, the governor appoints the commissioner, and the commissioner oversees the uniformed and non-uniformed, the civilian and the commissioned. So you got the commission would be the highway patrol, and then the non-commissioned, just any DPS employee. And the commissioner oversees all of that, and they have a cabinet underneath it and everything.
So they're kind of like the superintendent then.
Yes. And the chief is appointed. It is appointed by the commissioner as well. So, I had some really good support there. Of course, they interviewed me, went through their steps, and got into my life pretty heavily.
When you say they, who's they?
Our internal affairs, and then the department hired a law firm, Crone Dunleavy. I'll never forget. And they spent a lot of money to protecting the department and me. And
did you end up getting did you have to sit for a deposition with ACLU?
I did. And I tell you, that's a big part of when I teach classes, I realized at that point, and so this had rocked along for about about 2.5 years. And I went through some changes during, as far as like, you know, like if you ever are a uniformed police officer and you go out and do your shift and you're like, all right, I'm not going to stop any minorities. That's like, are you kidding me? I mean, how can you do your job and like, okay, I'm not going to stop any minorities. I mean, instead of just going out and stopping cars, and doing your job, you're having to worry about that. I kind of went through that, and I finally just like, you know what, the heck with this. I'm just going to go do my job and don't worry about, race, creed, color, any of that business, and deal with what comes. Well,
and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just if for guys that would consciously make that decision, that's a form of profiling, right? Racial profiling.
It is. It really is. And, and kind of jump around here just a second, one of the things that the last thing the federal judge said at the end of this whole thing was the very thing that the ACLU was accusing me of doing. They hired college kids to go out on the interstate and say that the interstate had this racial breakdown. And they would go out there and say, yeah, that car is this race, that car is that race. Like, how do you, and the judge is like, look, you're accusing Trooper Perry and your data comes from assigning people to go out on the interstate and say, this car has this race, this car has this race. If you can't show me that Trooper Perry treated this individual any differently that he treats anybody else, and we don't have nothing more to talk about.
So here's an interesting question I always used to do, because I used to get that too. You're just stopping me because I'm X. And I say, well, you're just saying that because I'm white.
Exactly.
Because at 10 o'clock at night, they're coming at you at 75 miles an hour. You're coming at them at 55 miles an hour. That's 130 miles an hour closure. I said, I must have some pretty damn good eyes to be able to spot you at 130 miles an hour and know exactly what race you are and what you were doing to turn around on you. I mean, you're stopping the car, not the person.
That's right.
Once you stop the car, then you deal with the person.
That's right. At 100%. And then that's where the drug courier characteristics come in, and what, and who you spend your time with and who you don't. Innocent motoring public, United States SOCOLO, that whole thing. But rocking along through that, back to that deposition, I realized real quick that this had nothing to do with me during that deposition. 9.5 hours of that deposition was they started with my high school transcript, went through college, and then they put down like the DIAP. Remember the books that DIAP made with they wanted to know every name of every instructor, they want to know every agency that's ever taught me anything.
They're on a fishing expedition.
Absolutely. So I tell people, like when I teach classes to this day, the fact I'm up here teaching you means something. Don't go out and be stupid and work because they'll don't take what I tell you out of context. Make sure you apply it appropriately. Make sure you listen to what we're talking about here and get it, because I've been a part of one of these things. So the last 30 minutes of that 9-hour deposition is when they very first started talking about the actual traffic stop. They didn't talk about Rosano Gerald for 8.5 hours. They talked about me and my training and who trained me. And so, matter of fact, during one of the breaks, the ACLU attorney told me, he goes, Trooper Perry, he goes, you're not the guy I thought you were. You're a pretty nice guy. And I just want to throat punch that guy, because you've dominated 2.5 years of my life at that point, But here's where my boss and having great leadership, like everybody wants to get involved in like a narcotics unit or a interdiction unit or whatever. But if you don't have the right leaders, it's not going to last. I'll never forget going down into the parking garage and getting in my Tahoe. And the day before this deposition, I had seized about $40,000 from a African-American guy from Phoenix. And I'd gotten back on the horse and started making seizures again. And Jim called me. He's like, well, are you done with your deal? I said, yes, sir. How'd it go, man? I think it went good. I'm real pleased with the way it turned out. And he goes, well, I hate to tell you this, but that money you seized yesterday? I said, yes, sir. He said, that guy has the ACLU of Arizona calling, and they want to join this lawsuit. And I'm like, you know what, Jim? I think I'm done. And so I drove an hour and a half I don't even really remember getting home, but I've never quit anything in my life, Murph. I walked in the house, and my wife, I remember like it was yesterday, she's sitting in the recliner, and I told her, I said, "Hey, I'm done. I'm turning this thing in." And, and she's like, "Okay, I'll do whatever you want to do." And so I told Jim McBride that the next day, and he's like, "Hey, I just want you to take some time off." And so I took about 2 weeks off work, and this is when I knew, like, I decided, okay, I'm going to give this another shot. So I went out the driveway about 2 weeks later, went 10-8 on the radio, and one of my partners was in pursuit. And man, we got in a heck of a pursuit, crashed, guns, drugs, fight, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I need to be doing.
Absolutely.
And so it was reinforced, it just took some growing on my part.
Yeah, but you bring up a point though too. It's like people don't realize. I fortunately never had to go through that, but I know guys who did. And it's like, and to your point, they don't realize how it hangs over you. I mean, you didn't know about this for a while, but then how long from the stop until you got notification that the ACLU was involved? How long of a time?
About 3 months.
Okay, so from that 3 months, during that 3 months, you're like, life is good. I'm back to doing what I've always done, right?
Working. Yep.
But then the minute the paper drops, life changed because now. I don't want to say this is what you did, but I kind of have an idea. This is probably what you did, right? You start overthinking things. You start second guessing some stuff, right?
Yes, all the time. I mean, it was, again, I tried to control. Okay, I don't want to get in trouble. Like, I don't want to have another lawsuit. So you don't do your job. You don't deal with people appropriately, and then you become a liability, really. And so it was quite. And I tell you what, my faith really, I had a lot of non-cop friends, men that supported me during that time, and my relationship with the Lord definitely was key in, like, just trying to figure out who I was and not really worrying about things I couldn't control, and just going out, and just doing my job.
This is, and our listeners have heard us talk, Morgan and I talk about this before, that law enforcement is a calling. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody has the temperament, the patience, the mindset to do it.
And it ain't for the pay.
Yeah. No,
exactly. You don't do it for the money.
You're right, Murph. That matter of fact, my work verse, Colossians 3:23, everything you do in word and deed, do it all in the name of the Lord, not unto man. And what I tell young police officers is, if you better, and I tell you, anybody who's listening to this, you better figure out, you better have a conviction of being a police officer. If the depth of your calling is a photograph or a trophy shot, you're not going to be in this job long. Right. You better have a deep conviction of why you're here, because times are going to be rough, and you better have something that's going to keep you.
The DEA Academy to bring in, this year has started bringing Javier and I in to speak to we call them BATs, basic agent trainees that are going through the DEA Academy. And we do our little presentation for a couple hours, and there's a Q&A, and somebody will always ask you, do you have any words of advice for these guys that they're still in the academy, but some could be graduating at the end of the week, and some could be in their first week of a 17-week academy. And my advice is two things. Don't ever give up. If you're going to be a quitter, go somewhere else. We don't need quitters in this job. And the second is, if you think this is a 9-to-5 job, you are definitely in the wrong place. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle. Yeah. And it's going to affect everything in your life, including your wife and children. So, you got to be willing to commit. I believe that our priorities should be God, family, and the job. But the truth is, we get it completely backwards.
Yeah, we do.
It's the job, it's the family, and then God. So, and I don't mean to be on my little pulpit here preaching or anything, but that's my personal beliefs, and it truly is a calling.
Well, when you start passing around the collection plate, Murph, I'm going to have to stop you at that point.
The Church of Murph is 20%.
I don't know.
There's 20% tithing.
Hey, well, let's kind of finish up something philosophically too, because this is something that it's like I've had people ask me this, and we kind of said, if you were asked to come back and serve, would you do it again? At our age, it'd be in a different role, but we're kind of getting to that point where you start thinking about, is that knowing what I know now and the way things are all now, would you come back and do this job again? And things have gotten so tough out there for a lot of our first responders, for our people in law enforcement. There is, I think hopefully the pendulum is swinging back a little bit. People are realizing, hey, look, man, we have to have cops. We have to have police. Just the same way you have to have a fire department. You have to have an ambulance, right? Emergency medical, right? But I think this relationship has been affected by a lot of things, by negative media. And the other thing, too, it's been affected by, imagine, for you folks listening out there, imagine having your life turned upside down and dragged through the mud for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every morning you wake up, what's hanging over your head? ACLU. You wake up the next morning, what's hanging over your head? ACLU. I mean, it's tough to do that. So, you know, you're like me. You come from the Midwest. There's people are different out there. Values are different out there. But how do we approach this? How do we look at this? How do we change things? Because my belief is the public has a responsibility to it. Just don't look at the cops and say, "Hey, it's you." No, I'm watching these videos. There was a video yesterday. I'm seeing of people pulled a guy, a DoorDash driver, just delivering food. They pulled him out. They started beating the holy hell out of him and stole his car. And I mean, I'm talking not just a couple people. There were like 15, 20 people. What, I mean, I kind of went off on a rant there. I apologize. Digression. But I'm just kind of looking at what you know now. What needs to change? What has to happen?
Man, I think we have to stick to our convictions. Evil is very apparent and is not going anywhere. Good men need to stay in this job. And I would say that, like, leadership in these departments, these departments really need to invest and know how to find genuine leaders. That's one thing that I've seen, success, breeds success. Having the right men and women in place to lead other men is paramount. The only reason we survived outside of the grace of God of this lawsuit, our department, was we had some really good leaders, and they didn't budge. I mean, in the midst of it, they supported the men. We still had a program. We still have a program to this day. It was never dismantled. I just really having, I'd say good leadership and conviction and knowing why, and being able to intelligently talk to the public of what the police officers run into. And I'd say probably spending time with, I just did it yesterday on the side of I-44, just spending time with people, explaining to them, what goes on out on the streets. And give them a little bit of insight. I'd probably say there probably needs to be a little bit more of that. Sometimes our genre is a little closed lipped, when it comes to what we truly run into at night, out on the highway or in the neighborhoods or whatnot, trying to educate to educate people.
But the problem is people wouldn't believe when you tell them some of these stories and the things that you've seen, the wrecks you work, the bodies, the abuse, the stuff. People can't fathom that, and because they can't fathom that, they can't fathom why it takes men and women. What was that Edmund Burke saying? For evil to triumph, all it takes is for good men, to do nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've actually got that pulled up here on the screen. We show that at every presentation, especially law enforcement, because you're the people that did not choose to do nothing. You chose to make a difference. And I'm going to get on my soapbox, and our listeners have heard this before, but to me, becoming a public servant is a badge of honor because you have chosen a career in which you're serving the public. You're not serving yourself. Now, we do have a few bad apples that get involved in that, and Morgan and I make this plain on every podcast we do. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. Yeah. But, where that badge is a badge of honor because everybody else is out there is out for themselves. It's out for them and their families. But here in the military and first responders, whatever it might be, where you're serving the public, God bless you, man. That is a true calling. The Bible says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," so they should be called the children of
That's
God.
Right.
So I'm real proud of.
Well, since we're throwing out sayings, my other favorite one is people sleep peacefully in their bed at night because rough men and now women stand ready to do violence on their behalf.
And I tell you what, I know, I'm telling you, I'm a better person just to be in the room with some of these people. I know some of those people, and I'm telling you right now, we are safer because we got them. And I'm not, I go out and do my thing in my little realm, but I tell you, I know some cops that are just absolutely heroes, and they go out and just get it and they go hunt down
Get her done.
the bad man now. And I tell you, we've got to have those people,
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of those people we've had on Game of Crimes. I mean, we have a roster of all stars.
I tell you, my favorite one is our Arkansas Fish and Game guy,
Mike Neal.
Buddy. I saw him in person. What a great story. Y'all did great with that one,
Well, I had the chance to award Mike when I first met him, was at the ICP conference, the International Association of Chief of Police. Him and another guy were getting Police Officer of the Year, and I had the chance to do that award for him.
Yep.
With that time, the Secretary of DHS, Janet Napolitano, and him and I had a long discussion, and then we brought him on. And you're right. I mean, you get people like that. It's like, here's a guy who drove 50 miles, had to fill up with gas, and because he filled up with gas, that's what put him into place. To be able to do what he needed to do.
I've never forgot that. That was a great story. And that Brandon Powder, that really hit close to home, that whole deal. We're not too far from, where we're at. And that was a tragedy, so.
Well, let's talk about you now. Let's finish up with, we see that you've got the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics.
Yep.
So what are you doing? Didn't you have enough dope to deal? Didn't you have enough shit to deal with? Why did you go dive in it again?
I tell you what, I talk about leadership. We've got a director right now. His name's Donnie Anderson, and he's probably one of the best leaders I've seen in a long time. He is over the OBN and has done great things with OBN. He approached me a few years ago and asked me to, if I thought about, how close I was to retirement and coming to work for him, and what he ultimately wanted was for me to manage a interdiction unit on the east side of the state. And I said, absolutely, I'd love to do that. So I had 27 years with the patrol, and I just went ahead and pulled the plug and applied for them. And I was the last 6 years on the patrol. I was a TFO with DEA, and so I naturally was able to go right over into the Tulsa OBN office and do the same thing and just investigate cases in plain clothes, until we could get this interdiction deal propped up. And just about a month and a half ago, I got my unit, got my Tahoe, got my uniform, and so I've been with OBN for 2 years, and now we're starting this interdiction unit on the east side of the state. We've got one in the central part. There's 7 guys on it, and so we're just expanding.
So you're going to compete now with the state patrol.
Oh, we're kicking their butt. Actually, just the opposite. So some of the guys that I worked with there, some of them have retired, but like one of them is a supervisor there, and so now we're working together as a team, and really making a good day. We're working. It's really fun. I never thought, that I would be doing what I'm doing.
Well, see, I can see how this works. Y'all get together for coffee and donuts. Yeah, we're stereotyping, and you go, okay, this week you guys work dope, we'll take money. Next week we'll take dope, you work
Pretty
money.
much.
We'll just you go one way on the interstate, we'll go the other.
It's really awesome. Matter of fact, we're working an emphasis next week over on I-40 together, the patrol and us, and good times, man. Well,
I got to tell you, we need to finish up, but I got to tell you one of my favorite stories. And I used to see people say, what are some of the tactics? And one of the best ones, I don't know if it came out of Texas or Florida or whatever, but they set up, some cars, and they set up in an area where there was a double yellow line on the highway, and they said narcotics inspection lane ahead, K9s in use. And all they waited was for the people to make an illegal U-turn, and there was your reasonable suspicion for a stop. And here's the funny part: there were no dogs. It was just a sign.
Just a sign. Yeah. Creative.
And just to, we talked about DIAP. That's the Drug Interdiction Assistance Program. Yes. So for our listeners, just so you know what
and
that
TFO
is.
Was task force officer. So, but I think people by now have heard this. Hey, well, look, dude, this great stuff. I'm glad you survived. By the way, there's this dude. Do you know this dude named Wayne Stinnett?
Oh man, he's
at the office.
Father Wayne, as I call him.
I was actually texting him here as we were talking. Yeah. He speaks very highly.
Well,
have you asked him about the crocodile yet?
I saw that that's a title of his deal. No, I'm not.
You want to talk about stuff you don't see very often, like the Standoff? Yeah. Go ask Wayne about finding a crocodile.
I certainly will.
Story.
I certainly will.
I'm pretty sure you won't hear that on any other true crime podcast anywhere in the world.
Not hear that. All right. So we dedicate this to your partner. We dedicate this to your father. Until Valhalla, we will have a drink in their honor tonight. So, but hey, man, dude, this is us saluting you. Keep up the good work. And if I happen to get out that way, I may end up in Wichita flying through. Tulsa's not that far away. Hey, by the way, did you ever run into Mr. Famous now, Stix Larson from Tulsa PD?
Oh yeah, I've run into him. I actually landed him as a speaker at a conference a year or so ago, and yeah.
Well, Murph and I have both done his podcast, Cops and
we need to bring him on Game of Crimes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's just what he needs. Something else to make him look cool.
There we go. Okay, we're gonna have to. On that note, we're going to talk about that later. All right. Well, look, you guys.
Truly honor having you on here, Branson. Thank you very much, brother.
Thank you.
This has been one of the fastest interviews we've been through. I think this was hilarious. Thank you for your transparency, being able to laugh at yourself.
You bet. Anytime. I love the craft and the men that allowed me to teach me this kind of stuff. I don't know. I've got the best. As one guy says, I think his name was Keith Aramia, Arkansas State Police. He said we have the front row seat of the greatest show on earth. There
you go.
It is,
damn Skippy,
and I believe that every bit of it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, man. You guys don't go anywhere. Everyone else, stay tuned for the debrief. Get your guns, boys.
Well, you talk about a memorable career. What a way to start.
A standoff with the sheriff.
Like 2 months.
Well, and the lady, I get it. She was a nice lady, and he ended up running into her later. But I tell you what, as a trooper, I used to cut a lot of breaks. But that's one of those where it would have been like, you failed to pull over. All you had to do was stop real quickly, give me the 30-second, hey, here's my badge, here's what I got going on. It would have been, okay, see ya. Mm-hmm. But this, anyway, but yeah, to have that kind of a standoff, and you just brand new out on the road, and it's like, nobody ever trained me for this one, boss.
Well, we mentioned in the intro that Branson is physically a big man. And it was funny, his description about how that sheriff was going around, are you the trooper? Are you the trooper? When he got to Branson, he just kind of had to look up at him and turn around and walked away.
As we used to say in Kansas, that boy's so big it takes two people to look at him.
There you go. In this case, discretion was a better part of valor for that sheriff, I'm sure.
And it worked out. But again, as you see, he's made a career out of it now. He's doing a lot of good work with OB&E. By the way, the only reason they call it the A1 conference, it gets confused with the Food Channel. Hey, this is the A1 conference. You get all these people showing up. Hey, where's my steak? It's the Association of Oklahoma Narcotics Enforcers. The only reason is because you can be the first one in the phone book, as they used to say. Why was every business named AAA and A1 and A+? Because they wanted to be first listed. Anyway, so A1. Very good. A1 and Branson, not Brandon Perry, Pinchot. You know what? BP, Brandon Pinchot, Branson Perry. Same initials.
No idea what you're talking about. Let's close the show out.
Saturday. It goes back to Saturday, Brandon Venture. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you did, head on over to that Apple and that Spotify. Hit those 5 stars. Always make sure you hit the click to download it too automatically. It helps us out. It helps you out. It helps your friends out. Look, it just helps the world. It helps reduce global warming and saves the planet. I just thought I'd make that outrageous claim because we can. Anyway, also head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com before we put a lot of our stuff there, including our books, our merch. You're going to find out our bonus episode we just had with Kathy Reichs, author of The Bone Hacker, her 22nd novel, inspiration for the Fox long-running series on Fox called Bones. Also follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also make sure you go to Game of Crimes Fans, type that into Facebook, join our club. Our favorite Mafia Queen, Sandy Salvato, will do Iron Fist, Velvet Glove will determine if you're worthy of entrance. And she will do that. But also patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We just did a 90-minute version of Q&A, and we had a lot of good questions, a lot of things we knew about, a lot of things we had to do some research on. But as we always promise, we answer every question, don't we, Murph?
We have not turned down a single question yet. And this one even had some question about our families, and we answered.
Yeah. Hey, you know what we're going to do? Out. And guys, one of the other cool things too, some people do stuff for us. Let me just play you a few seconds of some stuff we got from our buddy Alex Hall called Apollo's Might. Here, just listen to 10 seconds of this. Listen to this faint, awesome outro music. So we could use that, Murph, and say, thank you guys once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous, and trooper-friendly game of all, the Game of Crimes.